Hello, innovators. I'm Todd Wyant, and welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast presented by Graytech Group. You're invited to join our conversation to model the future of construction innovation and the digital transformation adventure of this great industry. My guest today is Brian Chapman. With over 25 years of experience, Brian's journey in construction spans roles as a CAD specialist, project engineer, and project manager, where he honed his experience in 3D modeling and BIM. As the founder of Lunix3D, he bridges the gap between cutting-edge visualization tools and practical solutions, offering valuable insight into 3D technology and coordination. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Thanks, Todd. It's so great to be here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation. So to begin, you had lots of different roles there that I just read out in the intro. What got you into construction, and tell me a little bit about your journey through the industry.
Well, I started, like you said, in the construction industry over 25 years ago. I can't believe it's been that long. I think it was 97. I was hired on as a CAD operator at a fire sprinkler engineering company that was near my house in Orange County, called Automatic Fire Sprinklers. They're a pretty big player in the industry, at least on the West Coast. I think they were just involved in a buyout last year. But I was brought in as a CAD operator in their engineering department. There was me and three other engineers, and I didn't even know what CAD was. They brought me in because they knew me already. I did some design work for them for their T-shirts, logos, and stuff. I grew up drawing a lot. I'm a designer. So they saw my work. I worked at a surf sportswear company in Orange County. And they saw my work and they hired me on because they really liked what I can do. And I had a relationship with them already, and they taught me how to do CAD. And I was already working with design applications like Illustrator and stuff from the design side in my earlier life. I quickly learned CAD, and I didn't really know much about the construction industry then. Like, I grew up drawing floor plans for fun when I was a kid. I was always drawing something. So it really kind of just made sense. It kind of just fit really well for me to be brought on, and they showed me the ropes, and I grew at that company. I ended up, my tenure there, I was the CAD specialist in the engineering department. I was in charge of making sure that they were on top of the latest technologies. They were using the best management practices that AutoCAD had, and I was teaching them how to use some of the latest tools. When I was brought on, AutoCAD was not even on Windows yet. It was a DOS system, and we had a huge tablet where we had to go and pick the commands from a mouse. I can't believe I'm saying that. It's so long ago now. It's like, if you're a programmer, you know what I'm saying. It's like programming in Fortran. It's so old now. But I ended up, like I said, being their CAD specialist and forging their way to make sure they're on top of the latest technologies. I started programming in AutoCAD with AutoList, which is an amazing feature with AutoCAD. I got to really applaud Autodesk for implementing the Lisp programming language to their back end. I utilize that still to this day. I just finished a project in San Diego where I had to get rid of a ton of objects in a 3D CAD file that I had to make an RCP plan for. And it would have taken me hours and hours and hours to go through and sift through all this data. And I wrote a Lisp program, and I was done in about 10 or 15 minutes. So that's just an example of the robustness of AutoCAD, and what I had to learn to help out that company and other companies now, since I have my own company. So I'm helping other companies now. But I was writing programs for them. Like I said, they were fire sprinklers. So I was writing automation programs where the hangers on the pipes were automatically populated. This is in the 90s. Automatically populated, so they don't have to sit there and go tick, 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 and stuff like that. And on the BIM side, BIM was not even an acronym then. It didn't even exist. AutoCAD was a 2D application that could do some 3D, but you're hard pressed to do 3D in AutoCAD back then. It was very complicated, but I was drawing 3D structures from my own learning experience back then. We didn't need it at that company, but I was drawing 3D structures so I could learn how to draw 3D back in the late 90s on AutoCAD. And I was making sure I was getting floppy disks from architects and electrical engineers, HVAC engineers, plumbing, not fire springs, we were fire springs, but plumbing, and making sure that I was doing overlays on AutoCAD, making sure that our pipes were not clashing with any other consultant, any other trade. And I can also see if their other trades were clashing with each other. And so I don't know how I ended up doing that. I ended up in that role, but I ended up in that role. I was doing flashing in a pre-BIM era back in the late 90s and early 2000s. And that's really the genesis of how I got into this. And it's really grown from there. In 2000, I started my first company. I parted ways from them. They became my client. And I took on more and more clients from there. I worked with KB Homes. They're one of the largest single family developers in the United States, building programs for them and helping out automating their architecture side of things. And so I really, I have a sort of penchant for making sure that I'm on top of the latest technologies. And then, as you know, in the early 2000s and 2004, 5, or 6, I think Autodesk bought Revit, and then that was a big game changer.
Yeah, the rest is history.
The rest is history.
So let's do a little myth busting around BIM. The maybe common conception is that you need BIM for big projects, but for smaller projects, is it worth the hassle? What say you?
I say it's a myth. And I also say that I can see why people think that. I've heard so many different stories from owners, architects, trades, GCs. They all have their own opinion and experience with BIM. And I think that's with everything in life, where they may have had a great experience with a BIM manager or a BIM team, or they may have a horrible one, or they may have invested some money and not the whole team didn't flesh out. They didn't know maybe they didn't know what they were doing, or they weren't prepared. So it wasn't successful. I have a client where their previous BIM coordinator and manager wasn't very versed in multifamily and more of just like a 3D designer modeler. And they had them on the team, and they kind of wasted the whole time because they didn't benefit. The BIM coordinator and manager didn't know how to implement all those changes, look for all the problems, because they didn't have on-site experience. And the plans were not communicated. The changes weren't communicated to the field. So it was pretty much a waste of time. And so that can happen. I think to bust this myth, you got to have a good team, and it can be a very small team. It can be one person, 2 or 3 people if it's a small project. They just got to know what they're doing, and everyone has to be in communication. They have to be on board, and they have to be on board to learn if they don't know. And one thing I am noticing, and I am actually becoming more of a fan of, is sort of BIM 1.0, which is just a 3D model. I'm not necessarily doing all the clashing, doing the 4D scheduling, and all the other elements that comes out of that ecosystem, like in a BIM 3.0 environment. I'm finding that for like a single family home or a small project, even if it's just a well-designed 3D model and just architecture, is really beneficial. And if it's just one person doing it or 2 people on board with that, helping the owner, the GC. Because what happens is the owner may not be able to see what is actually being built. I've worked with some owners who are building single family homes, and they had to go back to the drawing board with the architect because they realized they don't like what the architect was doing. They wanted to change so many different things. And it wasn't that expensive, and it didn't take that long. I think, it take a month of coordinating with the architect and building the model and generating 3D renders. And it was pretty invaluable because the owner would have been not as happy with the end product if that didn't happen. Mm-hmm. And so I think, Todd, that can be utilized for anything. If I was going to build a home or any project, BIM all the way. 100%. I don't care if it's a shed outside. I'm going to build a 3D model of that thing. It's going to be dialed in completely.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like it. I agree. BIM is definitely relevant for all project sizes and scopes. One of the things that you were just mentioned there that I want to kind of pick up and pull that thread a bit is you mentioned good communication and a willingness to learn something new as kind of being 2 key ingredients to making BIM successful. Maybe expand upon that, as well as what are some kind of common hurdles that people face or that can really prevent them from adopting BIM more fully.
Well, yeah, let's face it, the software can be maybe scary to learn at first and maybe daunting for some people. Just like I remember a lot of architects, they didn't know AutoCAD when I started. They were pencil and erasers and paper and vellum. Remember that word vellum? So it's just like with AutoCAD, Autodesk changed the industry, and it took a lot of time for these guys to get onto a digital realm, but they had to, and now that's the standard. And in my opinion, to just do a 2D CAD system for development is sort of archaic now. It's sort of like drawing with vellum and pencil and eraser. I love CAD. I use it all the time. I think CAD is an integral part of a BIM environment. I still think it still has a huge value, but I think to only use that is sort of really setting the project short. And I think what is ideal to happen in a team is the leader has to have a drive, a thirst for knowledge and for what's new and what's cutting edge. And they have to either communicate that to the team, or the team already has to be on top of it. When a team, let's say if a plumber is in a BIM environment and they don't really know, they're not really good at 3D modeling, they don't really know how to coordinate properly in a BIM environment, that could really set the project back. It can cause delays. It's happened with me before. I've had to deal with consultants or trades who delay the project by a month or more, or at least not the project, the BIM process over a month or more, just because they were quick to make changes or they didn't know how to. So their coordinates were off. They didn't know how to really get in there. And I think continual education for the team, for each trade, is important. So if someone's listening to this and they own a company who is a plumbing or an HVAC company, or they work for one, I think continual education is key to investigate what's new out there, what updates are happening with the software. And if they don't really know how to say, if they don't know how to use Revit, take a course. YouTube is probably the best learning tool right now, and go and figure out how to draw these things and how to integrate in a BIM environment, because it's highly technical. I've heard so many times where people are saying it's like space age now, what we're doing. It's really cool. I mean, making real-time changes on a BIM meeting. Everyone's on Zoom from across the country, and we're making real-time changes with engineers and architects on multi-million-dollar projects. And that just didn't happen before. It took weeks and weeks to make significant changes, and we're doing it, in days and minutes. It's happening like that. And it's valuable.
Yeah, for sure. Are there specific criteria that firms should take into account and evaluate when taking the leap into BIM and really trying to develop a full workflow, not just one particular software piece, but BIM is really the overarching workflow? What are those criteria for to really measure the ROI?
It's a good question. It's all about ROI, isn't it? I think when the hiring process, they need to make sure that if they have any new hires, that the person coming on board is already on top of it. And if they already have existing team members who are not, that they do support their education, their continual education, and they do make sure that their team is on top of the latest technologies and the latest standards of what's going on out there. And I think the ROI on that is probably pretty significant, because continual education is cheap. And I think that the software is not as expensive as it used to be to handle it. Autodesk has a subscription service now. I think in the beginning, sometimes it was cost prohibitive for some people, but it really isn't that way anymore. And so I think that as long as the leadership of the company, if they say the SVPs or the VPs or the project managers, as long as they're versed on BIM practices and a BIM environment and what it takes, it's really basically like a digital version of an on-site development process. That's what I've discovered, because I've spent 10 years on the field as a project engineer, project manager, like you said. And before then, I wanted nothing to do with being on the field. I just wanted to be on the computer. That's all I wanted to do. I'm a computer geek. And I think a lot of people who are in BIM, like the designers, they're just computer guys. And being on the field just opened my eyes because, and then go and being in BIM, completely in a BIM environment, the parallels are pretty significant. I mean, we're battling things out on Zoom like we would in a field. I mean, it's digital and it's virtual and it hasn't happened yet. So I think the leadership of each consultant, each trade, I think that they need to be knowledgeable on the value of BIM and how it can save the ownership and the GC time and money. The GC ends faster. They finish the project faster. They finish on budget, and that benefits the owner. And that's the ROI. That's what it comes down to. The owner's happy, and the GC save the owner time and money. The GC keeps the client, keeps the relationship. And it's the speed of trust. Speed of trust is that the next project comes around, that owner is going to hire that GC again. And that GC is going to hire that plumber again and that HVAC again, because they were all on board and it saved everyone time.
Yeah. So pulling on that leadership buy-in thread, let's talk to the people that may be listening that they're like bought in, love BIM, but my leadership isn't. How do you go about getting that leadership buy-in and maybe even the team buy-in to really develop that grassroots and frankly top-down approach to acceptance and really full implementation of BIM?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I think some good diplomacy would be key there. Yeah, I really think that if the team leader was not on board with BIM, I think what would need to happen is, and every case is different. I think they would need to be communicated to them the time saving and the money saving value. If the leader knew that the problems could be solved on screen before the field and eliminate potential mounds of change orders equal hundreds of thousands of dollars in time. I think if that doesn't catch a leader's ear, I don't know what would. I think that's the crux of it is you want to eliminate these conflicts in real life in the field where you're not hitting a light pole at the last minute. You avoid the light pole. You see it a month down the road. You get the forecast. It's like when you're doing BIM, it's like having the weather forecast, but a lot longer, and it's almost guaranteed. It's right there in front of you. There's no, the weatherman was wrong. It's going to be sunny today. No, there's a problem there. It's a real problem, and it's not going to be fixed until it's fixed through the engineering or the architecture or the trades. And it's going to be a problem in the field, and it's going to result in a change order and time delays. And so you're avoiding hitting that light post before you get there. You can move the light post and get it out of your way before it's even built. And so I think that a great leader, I go back again, a great leader is on top of the latest standards. And I think that they could be convinced with the ROI, with the time savings and the money savings, and the trust that they build with their clients and the relationships that they have with other trades. It's a small industry, and people word of mouth, and you have a trade that worked well with another trade and they recommend. That's how I get my projects. I don't advertise. It's all word of mouth. So that's the speed of trust where people, recommend you. And I think a good leader can realize that it's more business for them if they end a project successfully.
Yeah, for sure. So let's put the crystal ball on the table, okay, and do a little future casting. We're looking out kind of 5-10 years. Where do you see BIM headed?
I think I see BIM, and I hope I see BIM being the de facto standard baseline, where nothing gets developed without it. Could you imagine not having AutoCAD the past 10, 15 years? It's everyone's still drawing on pencil and pen, paper. So, you have someone drawing on pencil and paper outside of a quick sketch, can't do it. It's not going to happen, right? So I hope and I think what BIM's going to, and what it is it's going that direction. I do think BIM has had a couple hiccups, and it's kind of, I think it like blew up and it kind of retracted a little bit from the different experiences that people have and what the communication with the talk and the chatter. So some people are, and developers are saying, we've heard it's expensive, so we're not going to do it, blah, blah, blah. It's not big enough. So I think that chatter has sort of deflated BIM, but I think it's building back up again, and slowly. And it had a boom, compressed, and then now it's sort of building back up again. And I believe it's going to be, like I said, the de facto standard for any development, big or small, just like AutoCAD is. AutoCAD's the standard. If you're going to build something, at least there's AutoCAD involved. Like, there's no drawing on pencil and paper anymore. And I think in 5 or 10 years, if someone doesn't have a 3D model, at least a 3D model in place for the architecture, and then hopefully some other structural and hopefully some other elements too, I think either they're not going to get the job, or they're going to be laughed at, or they're going to have some serious problems. They're going to keep having more and more problems, and it's going to affect the cost and the times of projects. And it's interesting to see how different technologies that get integrated with BIM. BIM 3.0. I mean, you're dealing with budgets now and schedules. Before it was, there's a light there and there's some pipes there, and let's move in and fix it. Now there's budgets involved and scheduling, 4D scheduling. And so I'm curious to see what new technologies get implemented within the BIM environment.
Yeah. Well, I think that brings up an interesting question then. There is so much technology that's coming online all the time, and the existing technology is changing every single day, and new features coming on, that it can be very overwhelming to keep up with the technology curve. So how should companies best position themselves to really stay ahead of the curve? Going back to the education side that you brought up earlier, educating themselves on what's coming, what's happening, but then to stay ahead of that BIM technology curve.
I think just don't be afraid of something new. I think that's a really great mind frame to have for leadership, and also down to the detailer, the drafter. Don't be afraid of something new. Don't be afraid. If you're on AutoCAD, don't be afraid to open up Revit and poke around. You might find it's really easy compared to AutoCAD. It's very intuitive. When I first opened Revit, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a dream. I was trying to draw 3D walls and it took forever in AutoCAD. Back in the day, AutoCAD is updated a lot now. But back in the day, and I'm like, this is a dream. And it does all this. And don't be afraid of new technologies, and always be poking around with what's coming on board here. What can be changed? And, I always think, what can I be doing that could be more efficient? I like efficiency. It's one of my favorite things. I don't like spending 10 hours on something I can spend 10 minutes on. That's why I program with AutoCAD. And I think clients love that too. It's a smaller bill for them. So it's less time. And so to me, it's all about efficiency, and back to that trust, where if your client's always happy with that, and your team's always happy, and people like working in that environment, you're going to keep building relationships. But like I said earlier, YouTube is cheap. You can learn a lot just from YouTube. Companies probably don't like their employees on YouTube during the day, but they may want to rethink that, because there's a lot of good courses. Autodesk has great tutorials on YouTube. There's other third-party people that walk you through on how to learn Revit or 3D Studio Max, which is a great software, and AutoCAD, all the latest AutoCAD tricks. AutoCAD updates their software so much that you could be using AutoCAD. That's a 15-year-old way of doing something, because now they have new tools and features and buttons that you don't realize that's there anymore, or that are there, that wasn't there when you first started.
Right.
Yeah. I think
constantly be learning. That's what, all the new features that come online all the time. It's the tool is always evolving and always changing. So I think you have to maintain that good, healthy curiosity and going out and educating yourself 100%.
Yeah. And a team that supports that and encourages that from leadership down. And hopefully that environment's in place. And if not, we roll back to that. Okay, how do we get them on board? And that's how you have meetings and you talk to them about them, say, look, guys, it could really be improving. And when I go into a project, and if they're not on board with BIM, they're not sure, I'll evaluate and go, okay, you're afraid of this. So let's look at this and see, is it a real fear, or is it just a misconception or a myth? And I can value engineer a project, and I can communicate that to the company, and find out what areas we can work with and say, okay, well, you're afraid of this budget, so we can shift some things over here. We don't have to be heavy over there. Oh, you're still 30 to 40, 50% better off if you don't do it. I think it's known in the industry, if you catch 43 or 48% of the clashes in a project, it pays for BIM itself just alone. Just if you catch 43-ish%, we're catching, my last project, we're catching 98.9%. Yeah.
Right. No brainer.
It's a no-brainer. And there, I mean, I tell people some of the speed of these products that are going up, 500,000 square feet, 10 stories in 2 years. And, I've worked with projects that aren't in BIM, and they're half that size in 2.5, almost 3 years. I mean, the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah, for sure. So as we start to kind of land the plane here, a couple of rapid fire questions for you. We love innovation around here. So there's the theme for the next couple of questions. What is modeling the future? What does that phrase kind of mean and look like to you?
Modeling the future? Well, it means everything is in 3D or 4D. And it also just means, I'll take it a step further and more metaphorically, which is modeling your future, which is really just scoping out, seeing what you're doing, the project. When I say you, I mean the project or the company, seeing what you're doing and changing it, molding it, modeling it. Like, what is modeling? It's like molding. It's like a sculptor, right? So you're molding your future. You're molding the future of the project, of the company, and you're seeing the crystal ball. You're seeing what it's going to be like in real life. So you're not shocked when you step on site and it's nothing what you thought it was going to be, or it's only half of what you thought it was going to be, and 10 times more expensive. You're making sure you're taking your future, whether it's the project or your company or yourself, you're taking it in your own hands and you're shaping it. To me, that's...
Yeah, I like it. What does that mean to you?
It means continually evaluating your progress and improving on it. Like medicine is evidence-based evaluation and innovation. So they research what is working, what's curing, what's not curing, what's helping, and they research why, and then they make changes. And that's essentially the base point, the gears of innovation. I feel like innovation, the antithesis of innovation is the inertia of staying in the same place you were the year before, 5 years, 10 years before, doing the same thing, same way, the exact same way. Innovation is thinking, how could this be done better, faster, easier, more enjoyably as well? And ensure those changes, if you find changes, if it's a yes, put them in place. You try, don't be afraid to try something new. And if it fails, it fails, but you try it again. Hey, we have a new tool. We have a new way of doing things. And that's, to me, is the key to innovation.
Yeah, 100% agree. Brian, how do people find out more information and connect with you?
Yeah, thanks, Todd. I'm on LinkedIn, and my website is lunix3d.com, and love to have you there. Check it out. All information can be found there, and email and contact information on there. Give me a call, shoot me an email. I'd love to speak with you.
Awesome. Well, final question for you. If I could give you all construction power, you could snap your fingers and innovate one thing in the industry, what would you pick to innovate, Brian?
That's a big one. I think I would take the old school. I would take the old school way of doing things. I think it's just the theme of this whole podcast. Just the old mentality, the old school way. I grew up in a family of developers and carpenters and stuff. And so I know that old school way. And I would snap my fingers that everyone is on board with BIM 3.0 and above. I know that's probably you kind of knew that was coming, but I would do away with the time consuming not in person, nothing wrong with in person, but wait until you see it in real life on the field and then go from there. I would just completely undo all of that. And everything is derived off a model system, 100%. All the plans, all the field construction documents, the field documents, as-built from design phase all the way to as-built, a 3D model, a 4D system on top of that, from design phase all the way to closeout, 100%. Nothing is not derived from a 3D, 4D model environment.
Yeah. I like it. Yeah. I like it. No, it's a good way to go. Let's go efficiency. Let's bring on the tech and embrace where we are. We have these really cool, powerful tools and workflows. Let's embrace it.
Yeah, we have it, and let's use it. I think the only reason why is the fear of something new and the unknown, and that's why it's still not 100% there. But we're going to Mars pretty soon, I think, with SpaceX. Come on, we got to be doing things. We can be better.
I bet Elon's using these tools.
You kidding me? Oh my gosh, he would laugh. I would, if Elon got involved with the construction industry, we probably would be, 40, 100%, So,
for sure.
Yeah.
The possibilities there.
Absolutely.
Brian, thanks so much for taking the time and joining the show today.
Thanks, Todd. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me, and I really enjoyed it.